remember early on when I was in college, I had a college professor explain to us that fat was our body's preferred source of energy. Okay, fat is a very good way to have energy. And that same professor a couple of weeks later said, our bodies prefer sugar when we do exercise. Weren't we talking about fat just a couple of weeks ago? Yeah, forget about all that. It's sugar. So the message, even in top universities right here in the United States, are a bunch of mixed messages. Do I think there's a big responsibility for media to do the right thing? Yes, I do. You know, we had 3 big networks, the big 3, ABC, CBS, and NBC. Whatever they told us, we went with. Hell, when I was a kid, there was still even cigarette commercials on the air. At least we figured out that that was a bad idea.
Don't settle for Sullivan taste, Sullivan time.
It's very easy to see how someone can think something or just say something and that becomes a reality.
Breakfast. No eggs or fatty meats. Instead, eat grains and fiber that actually lower cholesterol.
How about the term heart-healthy grains? We've all seen it. Many people believe it. After all, the terms come from studies that prove it to be true, right?
Those were studies looking at whole grains versus white processed flours and grains. So of course, when you're comparing it to something like white processed flour, it's going to be better. But does that mean it in and of itself is therefore heart healthy?
You could make the argument that whole grains are less bad for you than refined grains, but that doesn't make whole grains good.
Oatmeal, or oat bread, or an oat muffin, or oat bran that is either incorporated into some other cereal product.
It's like cigarettes. You can have cigarettes with a filter on, and they're less bad for you perhaps than unfiltered cigarettes. Doesn't make the filtered cigarettes good. It just means they're less bad. And the same thing is true for whole grains. They are less bad.
We should put more emphasis on our vegetables. We should think about the vegetables we're going to have for dinner rather than the meat portion.
Listen, I'm not a doctor. I'm just a guy with a physical education degree who became a trainer and somehow found myself in the world of modeling. Before I became a trainer to the stars and eventually a best-selling author and podcaster. But when I started modeling in LA in the early 90s, I realized that the media will sell us anything to make a buck, regardless of whether it's healthy or not. Let's face it, every beer commercial you've ever seen is a bunch of ripped up guys on the beach playing volleyball because that's what beer drinkers look like. If you have ripped up abs or you have a nice set of shoulders, they want you modeling everything in the infomercials. It was the heyday of the infomercials.
If we think fat, then we are.
Fad diets, powders, pills, still my weight's been up and down like a yo-yo until the AIDS plan taught me how to take off weight and help keep it off.
Just 20 minutes a day will turn your body into a calorie-burning furnace.
We were coming into this age of, hey, if you just do what I tell you, you can look like this guy or this woman in just a few weeks.
Dexatrin did it. I lost weight and feel great.
Nobody wanted the truth. They just wanted a lie that they could get everyone to believe.
Now you can lose weight without diets.
No, this product really doesn't work.
Without pills.
No, that product really doesn't work.
Without exercise.
Well, what does work?
Now you can lose weight just by watching television.
So I learned very quickly, be careful as to what you advertise. The 1920s and 30s, it was a lot different. We were learning a lot of things back then. We were discovering vitamins for the first time. We also learned that food could heal. And a lot of these therapies are what were being used to heal people. They were using non-starchy, non-sugary diets to starve cancer in the 1920s and 30s. Take Otto Warburg, for instance. He was doing cancer studies on rats. He thought that the outcome would be that oxygen was what was fueling cancer cells to grow. And what he learned with rats was that it was actually the sugar.
In the healthy cell, glucose is split into carbon dioxide and water. The tumor cell, however, is able to split glucose into lactic acid, and so, in a certain sense, get along without oxygen, and at the same time, obtain the necessary energy from its food. This is true not only in tumor cells separated from the body, but also true of tumors in animals and human beings.
His discovery was well known as the Warburg effect, and it was shown to help in somewhere near 80% of the cases of people who had cancer. Why does it feel like no one knows this information? We were making these discoveries, so what else contributed to them not taking hold? We had a Great Depression, and then we had a war. A lot of people were having trouble putting food in their mouth, period. So I don't think people were caring that much about their health. People were just trying to eat anything. People didn't eat out as much. We made homemade dressings. You didn't have dressings that were full of processed oils, and we weren't adding high fructose corn syrup to everything that we ate. We ate real whole foods that were cooked at home. Even fast food was different back in the 1940s and 50s. If you had French fries, they were made from rendered animal fat, basically beef tallow, which was a better way to cook junk food. So even our junk food was better in the 1940s and 50s and 60s. It wasn't until we got to the 1950s where people started to become more prosperous. We saw the advent of TV dinners and all this stuff, and more sugar, and processed foods came from everywhere. But what really happened in 1955, when one of the most popular presidents of our time, Dwight D. Eisenhower, had a heart attack.
News of President Eisenhower's sudden illness, described by his doctors as coronary thrombosis, came as a severe shock to us all.
Films of President Eisenhower made just before his heart attack are dramatic evidence of the suddenness of the illness that shocked the nation.
President Eisenhower's heart attack struck at a time when he was close to the zenith of his prestige at home and abroad. It follows that the president's illness is a vital concern to the entire world.
Well, if he could die, what could happen to me?
You have to understand, this is a period in the 1950s when America is in a complete panic about the rising tide of heart disease.
Before that, we never thought about heart attacks. We never thought about health and fitness. We didn't think about the food we were eating. No one back in the 1950s knew what their cholesterol score was, much less even knew what the word cholesterol meant.
Medical textbooks tell us that cholesterol is a white compound, somewhat soapy to the touch, and is distantly related to alcohol.
It is no alien poison to be avoided by man at any cost, but an important element in the body's chemical machinery.
Cholesterol is a kind of a fat-type molecule. It's in all of our cells, 30 trillion cells.
Cholesterol is actually so important to the body that it actually makes the majority of cholesterol that's in your blood right now. But most of the dietary cholesterol you eat will go through you, and very little actually gets absorbed. And of that cholesterol you find in the blood, most of it was made by your liver.
It is an essential of nerve tissue, for instance, and a raw material for the production of several hormones, bile, and a form of vitamin D. It is found naturally in the blood, and also often in the walls of arteries and other blood vessels.
If you eat more cholesterol, your body will make less. If you eat less, your body will make more, which makes it very interesting that it was so maligned in the past few decades.
Heart disease had been rare in the early 1900s and had really risen since the late 1920s to be the #1 killer disease by the 1950s.
We took a collective gasp in this country. We didn't want to have another president die in office.
Just imagine your president not being in the Oval Office for 10 days and he's in bed.
Besides, this guy was very popular. People wanted to find out what caused it. Could it have been his diet? And if so, what was he eating and how can we change it? This was also the time when the media was more prevalent.
Motion picture cameras join newspaper reporters in the old State Department building for an historic presidential press conference. The first ever filmed in sound by newsreel cameramen.
Well, I see we're trying a new experiment this morning. I hope it doesn't prove to be a disturbing influence.
The power of media. You can't really tell that story without telling the story of Oprah Winfrey. It was 1993, and by happenstance, I was put up for an appearance on Oprah. They needed someone the next day. They were looking for younger men who were dating older women. And since my girlfriend was 7 years older at the time, I was invited on. I wasn't into it. I had no idea what really happened on Oprah. But I was told, no, you have to do it. It'll be great for your career.